I was halfway through a 12-hour shift when my cousin Emily texted me a screenshot that changed everything. At first, I thought she sent it by accident. Then I zoomed in. It was a digital program for our upcoming family reunion in Asheville, North Carolina. The organizers had created a section called Family Updates, where every adult relative had a short description beside their name. My older brother Ethan, senior vice president at a tech company, my cousin Rebecca, pediatric surgeon, my aunt Linda, real estate investor, and then there was me, Olivia Carter, currently unemployed. I stared at the screen so long that my coffee went cold, not because I was unemployed, because I wasn't. I had spent the last 7 years building one of the fastest growing non-profit education initiatives in America. The organization had reached millions of students. We had partnerships with schools across multiple states. I was working 18-hour days trying to keep everything together. Yet somehow, according to my family, I was unemployed. Emily called me immediately. "I'm so sorry," I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it wasn't surprising. "Who wrote it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Aunt Patricia." Of course it was Patricia, the self-appointed historian of the family. The woman who never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that success only counted if she understood it. "What exactly does she think I do?" I asked. Emily sighed. "Honestly? Most of them think you're still doing some kind of volunteer work." I felt something sink inside my chest. 7 years. 7 years of sacrifice. 7 years of sleeping in airports, missing holidays, working weekends. And apparently my own family thought I spent my days sitting around doing charity projects. The worst part? None of them had ever asked. Not once. They just decided. A week later, I arrived at the reunion. The second I walked into the lodge, I felt it. That familiar energy. The subtle glances. The smiles that weren't really smiles. The way people looked at successful relatives with admiration and looked at me with pity. My mother hugged me. "Oh honey, it's good to see you." Then she lowered her voice. "Maybe don't mention work too much." I blinked. "What?" She glanced around. "Your cousins are doing really well right now." I stared at her. "What does that have to do with me?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I just don't want you feeling embarrassed." Embarrassed. I almost laughed, but suddenly I understood. My family didn't just misunderstand my career. They had created an entire story about my life. A story where I was the family disappointment. The daughter who never figured things out. The dreamer who couldn't get a real job. And everyone had accepted it as fact. At dinner that night, the humiliation got worse. Uncle Robert raised a glass. "Let's hear updates from everybody." One by one, people shared promotions, business deals, and achievements. When it reached me, Patricia smiled sweetly. Dangerously sweet. Olivia's still figuring things out. Several relatives nodded sympathetically. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Before I could speak, Patricia continued. "But that's okay. Success isn't everything." The table laughed, not cruelly, almost worse. They genuinely believed it. I forced a smile. "Actually, work has been going pretty well." Patricia tilted her head. "Oh, still doing that non-profit thing?" "That non-profit thing." 7 years reduced to 4 words. I took a breath. "Yes, that's nice," she said. Then immediately turned toward Ethan. "So tell us about your new bonus package." And just like that, I disappeared again. Later that night, I sat alone outside overlooking the mountains. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt tired, exhausted. Not because they didn't understand my work, because they never wanted to. Growing up, Ethan had always been the golden child. Every achievement celebrated. Every mistake excused. Meanwhile, my successes were treated like hobbies. When I earned scholarships, they called me lucky. When I graduated at the top of my class, they said the program wasn't competitive. When I started my organization, they called it a phase. No matter what happened, they always found a way to make it smaller. And I finally realized something. If my last 7 years couldn't convince them, nothing would. The next morning, things took an even stranger turn. I woke up to 23 missed calls. My phone was exploding. Emails, texts, voicemails, news alerts. For one terrifying second, I thought someone had died. Then I opened the first message my assistant had written. "Call me now. You won." I frowned. "Won what?" Then I saw the article. My heart stopped. The previous night, while I had been sitting outside questioning my entire life, a major announcement had been released. Time magazine had selected its Person of the Year. And somehow, some impossibly ridiculous way, they had selected me. I read the headline 5 times, then 10, then 20. It still didn't feel real. Apparently, our education initiative's impact over the previous decade had caught global attention. Millions of underserved students, thousands of schools, programs adopted internationally. Years of work I never expected anyone to notice. The article called it transformational. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed. Then my phone rang again. A producer from a national news network. Then another. Then another. Everything exploded. Within hours, the story was everywhere. And that's when the real chaos began, because my family saw it too. I walked downstairs and immediately noticed the silence. The room looked like someone had paused reality. Every relative stared at me. Patricia's face was completely white. Ethan looked confused. My mother looked like she'd seen a ghost. Nobody spoke. Finally, Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Olivia. I waited. He swallowed. Is this real? I almost laughed. Because suddenly everyone wanted answers. Suddenly everyone was interested. Suddenly my life mattered. Yes, I said. The room remained silent. Then questions started flying. How long had this been happening? How many employees did I have? How many countries? How much funding? How much influence? How much money? It was fascinating. The exact same people who ignored me 24 hours earlier now treated me like a celebrity. But the biggest surprise came from Patricia. She pulled me aside after lunch. Her voice was trembling. Why didn't you tell us? I stared at her. For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. She genuinely believed I had hidden everything. Tell you what, that your organization was so successful. I looked directly into her eyes. I did. Her face fell. What, for 7 years? The silence between us felt heavy. You never listened. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out because she knew I was right. Then came the revelation that changed everything. That evening, Emily confessed something she had never told me before. 3 years earlier, Time magazine had contacted several family members while researching a feature about rising social impact leaders. The reporter had spoken to Patricia, and Patricia told them I wasn't important enough to interview. I thought Emily was joking. She wasn't. The reporter had eventually found other sources. The article was published anyway. But Patricia had actually tried to stop them. Why? Because she genuinely believed I was exaggerating my accomplishments. I felt sick. Not angry. Not shocked. Just sad, because it finally explained everything. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was something deeper. They needed me to stay small. Because if I succeeded, it challenged the story they'd been telling themselves for decades. The story where Ethan was the star. The story where Patricia was the expert. The story where they were always right about people. My success threatened their identities, and that terrified them. The next day brought karma in a way I never expected. A national television crew arrived at the reunion lodge. Someone had leaked my location. Reporters wanted interviews, photos, statements. The entire property became a circus. Suddenly the same relatives who barely acknowledged me were introducing themselves to journalists, Patricia especially. I watched her tell one reporter, "We always knew Olivia was special." I nearly choked on my coffee. Always knew. The woman who called me unemployed. The woman who ignored every accomplishment. The woman who dismissed my career for years. Now she wanted front row seats to the success. The reporter smiled politely, then asked a question that destroyed her. Can you tell us about Olivia's early work building the initiative? Patricia froze. She knew nothing, not the year it started, not the mission, not the struggles, nothing, because she had never cared enough to ask. The silence stretched painfully. Finally she muttered, "You'll have to ask Olivia." The reporter turned away, and in that moment everyone saw it. The truth, not just about Patricia, about all of them. They knew almost nothing about my life, because they had never bothered to learn. That night, my mother knocked on my hotel room door. She looked older than usual, smaller somehow. We sat together for a long time before she finally spoke. "I'm sorry." I looked at her. She started crying, not dramatically, just quietly. The kind of crying people do when they've been carrying guilt for years. "I should have defended you. I didn't say anything. I let everyone define who you were." Tears rolled down her face, and eventually I started believing them. That hurt more than anything. Not Patricia, not Ethan, my mother. Because deep down, every child wants one thing, to know their parent sees them, really sees them, and for years she hadn't. We talked until almost sunrise. For the first time in decades it felt honest. No pretending, no excuses. Just truth. The reunion ended 2 days later. As people packed their bags, something strange happened. Nobody talked about awards anymore. Nobody talked about headlines. Instead, relatives approached me one at a time. Not to ask for photos. Not to brag about knowing me. To apologize. Some awkwardly, some sincerely, some with tears. Because the award hadn't exposed my success. It had exposed their assumptions. And assumptions are hard to defend once the truth becomes public. 6 months later, Time magazine's cover was old news. The interviews slowed down. The attention faded. Life returned to normal. Mostly, Patricia never fully apologized. I don't think she could. Doing so would require admitting she spent years judging someone she never understood. Some people would rather protect their pride than face reality. But that's okay. I stopped needing her approval. That's the real ending. Not the award, not the recognition, not the headlines. The real ending was realizing I had spent years trying to convince people to see my worth, and the moment I stopped needing their validation was the moment I became free, because success didn't change who I was. It revealed who everyone else had been all along. The family reunion taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes people don't underestimate you because they lack information. Sometimes they underestimate you because your success makes them uncomfortable. And when the truth finally arrives, it doesn't just reveal your accomplishments. It reveals the stories people created about you, and the reasons they needed those stories to be true. The funny thing is, the line that hurt me most wasn't currently unemployed. It was still figuring things out. Because they were right about one thing. I was figuring something out. I was figuring out that the people who truly matter never need a magazine cover to recognize your value. And the people who only notice you after the world applauds were never really paying attention in the first place.